I'm Bradley, and I'm a music producer and solo artist, and this is a follow-up to my last video about recording vocals. A bunch of my clients that I shared it with, as well as a couple viewers of the last video, asked me if I recommend recording through any processing. And while I didn't recommend it in that video, I actually do record through processing when I'm recording vocals, and one of the main reasons I got a UAD interface was to do that more easily. Plus, I know a bunch of people got UA interfaces recently during the deals they were doing, and if that's you, I hope this can maybe help you get some ideas on how to use it while recording your vocals. While I still do recommend that absolute beginners record clean and add processing later, I do personally like to commit to sounds, create sounds, and commit to sounds while I'm recording and not be indecisive and leave myself a bunch of work for later. So if you want to know how I do that for vocals, let's get into it. Let's talk about some processing. Now, we're going to talk about UAD mainly because it is basically the only thing I know of that lets you record and monitor in real time while adding effects. If you don't have UAD, you can do most of the same stuff with other plugins. The only difference is you're not going to be able to monitor live unless you have a really low latency interface and zero latency plugins. And you're probably not going to be able to record through it live either. I know Oak Felder, the producer for Demi Lovato, does do that sometimes in Logic. I've never been able to make that work for myself. That's just something to keep in mind. If you really want to do live monitoring and recording through everything the way I'm doing it here, you're going to want a UAD interface. Check out something like the Solo or the Aero. Those are maybe like $500, and it's going to be your most affordable way to get into this stuff. And I'm going to try and keep it mostly to stuff you're going to get with the interface. So I'm just going to show you the kind of processing you can do while recording your vocals, and I'm also going to show you a little bit extra secret sauce that will add just an extra touch to your sound. So we're going to start off with the preamp, which you have already engaged. This is the only thing I did buy separately. Feel free to use the stock preamp that comes with the interface. The only real difference you're going to get there is that it has a bit of a different sound. Otherwise, all I'm really doing here, other than using the gain and using it as a preamp to color the input signal, is I've got the 70 hertz high pass filter engaged, and I'm going to really exaggerate the bass right now just so you can hear it. This is with all the bass. This is with the 70 hertz high pass filter. It's just rolling off a bit of low end, and the reason I do that is we're about to compress in a minute, and when you're compressing, one thing that some people don't necessarily know is that low end is going to affect compressors more, and if there's too much low end, you're going to get more compression than you wanted. So I tend to roll off bass before compression, just so that I kind of have it sounding a bit more the way I want, and the compression's really just there for evening out dynamics and adding a bit more of just a nice tone depending on the compressor. Every compressor has its own sound that obviously it's bringing as well. One other thing is, if you do want to do any more EQ than this, the other place I would start is maybe a light high shelf. Now, you don't have to do this. This is really only if you know you want to add a little bit of extra EQ. And the way I would figure that out is you could either record with it and record without it and listen back and see which one you like better, or you could record with no processing whatsoever, add the plugin onto that recorded track, kind of as a test track, do whatever EQ you want, get it sounding right, and then copy those settings back over into the console of UAD and then record through that. That's just a little workflow I do. I don't know how common that is, but that is something I did want to mention before we move on. So next up is the compressor, which we will engage, and you can hear it right now. I would tend to keep it so that when you're at a pretty consistent volume, you're going about 1 to 3 dB. And I would, if you're recording through this, singing or talking, I would go as loud as you think you'll ever go, and probably don't want it to hit more than 7, maybe 10 on a occasional loud note. Definitely keep an eye on that. You don't over compress on the way in, because you cannot undo that. So you might even want it a bit farther back so that you're barely touching it when you're at a normal volume. But if you go, whoa, you're only hitting like -5 even. -5 to -7 is probably the most you ever want to do, or you're going to start over compressing. I really like this LA2A Silver. There's a legacy version that comes with your interface, and it just has a really smooth sound, and it is pretty easy to use because there's only 2 knobs. There's the volume and how much you're compressing, and whoa, that's how much it will go. That probably made me super quiet, but yeah, I would just dial it in, and this is kind of a thing you can set and forget, so long as you're definitely sure you're not going to compress too much. Now, before we get over to the last bit, I do want to talk a bit about reverb. Now, you can monitor reverb the way I talked about in my previous video, but if you're using UAD, you go over to aux, and you see the two sends, and the best way is just to grab a reverb, put it on send 1 or aux 1. You can have this button on so that it's just wet. You don't have to touch this knob. And then if you go to sends over here, turn up aux 1, and now you've got reverb. That's way too much, but you can add just a little bit here, and even if you're recording with this red button to record the effects over here, the reverb's not going to be recorded, and this will just be for your monitoring needs. Very nice. Last up, the little secret sauce that I always add is tape. And let's turn this on right now so you can hear what it's doing. Not a huge difference for sure, but it has a texture. It smooths out transients. It adds a little bit of harmonics. It's just a really nice sound. And if you're recording through it, you can have it on every track and you're not going to do a crazy amount of processing. Now, I'm even going to dial this back a little bit. Normally you'd want to hover around 0, but I really don't want to risk adding any distortion with this, so I would keep it a little more subtle, just playing with the input volume. This is a plugin I'm not sure will always come with every interface. I might have got a special deal to have it, but if you do have one of these, it's a great sound. The only other thing I would do, other than making sure you're definitely not going into the red, if you start on 15, which is the tape speed, and 7.5 is going to be a bit more of a drastic character. It's going to be a little bit more pronounced. So if that's the sound you're going for, you can put it on 7.5, but otherwise, I typically keep it on 15, and I'm going for a bit more of a subtle, just light coloration. And that's all I would really do when I'm recording vocals. So I'm going to give you a quick before and after here, and then we're going to cut to a singing demo. Here's what it sounds like, just going clean into the UAD interface with no other processing. And here is what our chain sounds like on my speaking right now.
Over the edge, stuck in the way. You're too distant, I can tell. Keep checking the hands as they run away. Don't tell me I'm fine, you'll lead me astray. Scratch the hand you wanna obey. Tell me why I was built this way. Tell me why I was built this way.
Thanks for watching. I know this is a topic with a lot more depth, and I did try to keep it to a mix of what I do and what I would recommend doing. But if you do have any more questions, feel free to leave a comment. Or if you're one of my clients, feel free to message me with your questions directly. I'll leave a link to my previous video on recording vocals, as well as my gear recommendations in the description. And I'll also have a link to where you can inquire if you'd like to work with me. Otherwise, do all the like and subscribe stuff, and I hope you have a good day.